This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the Equals to Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the result against Huddersfield by bringing you my match view player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you an exclusive interview with Frank de Boer and Ruben Loftus-Cheek after the game. So let's begin. Palace saw their Premier League campaign get off to a poor start as Huddersfield Town recorded a convincing victory at Selhurst Park. The new boys raced into the lead via a Joe Ward own goal and a strike by Steve Mounie, and he would wrap up the win by notching a second late in the second half to ensure Frank de Boer's first league game as Eagles boss would end in defeat. Hopes had been high before kick-off when the team was warmly greeted by a packed Selhurst Park decked in red and blue, but Huddersfield game plan was quickly implemented as they attacked the Eagles on the counter and they found plenty of joy in the first half. There was an early let-off when Tom Ince side-footed an attempt at Wayne Hennessy when well placed, and then after 20 minutes Philip Billing drove a powerful blast straight at the Welshman from 30 yards. But 3 minutes later the 3,000 visiting fans were celebrating when they registered their first ever Premier League goal. Aaron Moy's dangerous cross was flicked on by Christopher Snyder at the front post, and when his centre-back partner Matthias Gordonsson played it back across the area, it hit Joe Ward and the ball agonisingly trickled over the line. Palace was stunned, and 2 minutes later they found themselves two behind when another attack down the left caused problems. Moy was the architect again, and when he was slipped into space by Cross Low, his cross was perfect for the unmarked Mounie, who gleefully headed past Hennessy to hand de Boer's team a mountain to climb. It could have been even worse on the half an hour mark when only a last-ditch sliding tackle by Ward prevented Ince from netting on his Selhurst return. And then Jorgensen should have done better when another corner caused problems, but the Danish international nodded wide. Needing something to spark them back into life, Wilfried Zaha provided a glimmer of hope when he wriggled past Schneider and then Jorgensen to get a sight on goal. And his low strike was destined for the bottom corner, but Jonas Lawson got a slight touch with his foot to edge it past and wide of the post. And then after, the winger struck another attempt straight at Lawson. Christian Benteke headed a corner just wide, as Palace rallied before the break. They would go into the interval two behind, but knowing that one more goal would seal an opening day victory, the Terriers continued to push, and after Lowell saw a bouncing low drive pushed away by Hennessy, Mounie blasted the follow-up over the bar. Andros Townsend was introduced at the break and straight away made an impact, jinking his way down the right before centering, but Christian Benteke couldn't quite reach his pass. However, he did get on the end of a Patsy Van Aanholt corner on 53 minutes, but a superb reaction save by Lawson denied last season's top scorer from getting off the mark for the new campaign. The pressure was being cranked up, and a wonderful sliding challenge and crossfield pass by Ruben Loftus-Cheek released Zaha again, who tricked past Danny Williams but couldn't find his way past Lawson. However, the Eagles' efforts were nearly undone when a mistake at the back by Scott Dan allowed Mounie to race one-on-one with Wayne Hennessy, but before he could seal the win, Timothy Fosu-Mensah charged back to put in another fine last-ditch tackle and keep Palace in the game. Time was slipping away from them though, and Dan latched a chance over the crossbar when a corner fell nicely to him, and that proved to be a costly miss as a minute later Town wrapped up the win as they bagged a third. A long ball down the flank released Colin Kwanda down the right, and he teed up Mounie, who had broken into the box, and the Benin international rattled the ball in first time to condemn Palace to an opening day defeat. The chances continued to fall for the Eagles, and both James Tonkins and Christian Benteke squandered opportunities for the consolation late on, as Palace once again failed to win their opening home game of a Premier League season. A new season, but it was a familiar tale for Crystal Palace fans as the Eagles lost out on their opening day of the season against Huddersfield Town yesterday. For the fourth time in 5 seasons in the Premier League, the Eagles started a new campaign with a defeat, as an own goal from Joe Ward and 2 goals from Steve Mounie gave the newly promoted Terriers the perfect start to life in the Premier League. But what went wrong for Palace, and what do we learn from the game at Selhurst Park? Here are 5 things. Number 1. Lofty ambitions. There weren't many positives for Crystal Palace on a bitterly disappointing afternoon, but the performance of Ruben Loftus-Cheek was one of them. He grew into the game in the second half, and he was Palace's standout performer, with the Chelsea man excelling in a deeper role after Luka Milivojevic was substituted. Together with Timothy Fosu-Mensah, the two loanees were Palace's best performers on the day, and offered hope of what may be to come for Palace this season. Number 2. De Boer needs time. The Dutchman is hoping to bring about a change in style at Crystal Palace, but it is clear to see that will take time. Palace are adapting to his new ideas and a 3-4-3 formation, and the evidence on that showing is that it doesn't quite click overnight. Yes, Palace have 6 weeks of pre-season working with De Boer, but it may take a few competitive games for things to take full effect. Number 3. A case for the defence. Crystal Palace struggled defensively last season, particularly in the first half of the campaign, and on this showing there is still work to be done. The Eagles looked vulnerable at set pieces and were indebted to Joe Ward and Timothy Fosu-Mensah for some last-ditch tackling to prevent the scoring being the worst. There is still work to do, and Palace fans are being pretty clear on who they want to see come in. Number 4. Palace lacking the clinical edge. As Frank de Boer said in his post-match press conference, Palace had chances, particularly in the second half with Christian Benteke and Scott Dann, and if they had taken one of them, this may have been a different story. If Palace had got it back to 2-1, there was every chance that they could have salvaged a point, and there is no doubt de Boer would still want his players to be more clinical in front of goal. And number 5, an opening day blip. Palace don't have the best opening day record, with just 2 wins in the last 10 games on the first day of a new season in the past decade. That has now become 2 in 11, with Huddersfield Town's 3-0 win, the 6th time the Eagles have tasted defeat on the opening day since 2007. But while Palace may be bottom of the table for now, let's not forget there are still 37 games to go. Now I'm going to move on to the player ratings, but before we do that, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace, a place where you can get all the latest Palace news. And also, if you are on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group at the Crystal Palace group, where you can also join in with discussions and also share your opinions with other fans. Now, if you are listening on YouTube, then do feel free to also drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, obviously rating the players from 1 to 10, along with your views from the game, so I can see what you thought about the game, and also so that other people who come to the video can see your thoughts about the game and see what you had to say. And considering it was a 3-0 loss against the newly promoted side, I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. But obviously, if you do want to find any of these social media groups, then all the links will be in the description below. But enough of that, now we're going to move on and start with the player ratings, starting in goal with Wayne Hennessy, who I'm going to give a 6. Didn't have too much chance with the goals, but looked uneasy at times when the ball was played to his feet. Made a couple of saves. So obviously Wayne Hennessy here, I've given him a 6, and quite a lot of people might disagree with this considering we did lose 3-0. But if you look back at the game, you know, people may say that Hennessy was quite static, he didn't move for the goals, but I don't think he had too much chance with the goals. You know, if we look at the first goal, that was an own goal from Joe Ward. The ball got crossed in at the front post, got headed back to the far post, and it got bundled in from Joe Ward. Wayne Hennessy was in the middle of the goal. There was no way he could have gone to save that because Ward had deflected the ball in for the own goal. The second goal, it was a really good header going into the top corner. Obviously, Hennessy, flat-footed, he couldn't quite dive enough. And then the other one, the third goal, he did try and make a dive for that, but because the defence was left so exposed, you can't really blame him for not making the save because the defence wasn't there to protect him, to give him a chance to, you know, try and at least make the save. But, you know, other than that, you know, I think I'm not going to criticise him for the goals, but there was a few times throughout the game where he didn't really look good on the ball. He looked quite uneasy, you know, probably because he's always played long ball football. He's never really played that sort of Ajax style where he's playing it at his feet, he's playing it from the back. And certainly, looking back at the game, he did sort of struggle when the ball got played back to him. He didn't know whether to pass it or to kick it. So he did sort of struggle when it was played to his feet. But I'm not really going to criticise him too much because he's a player who, for all his career, who's played sort of your standard football, you know, hoofing the ball up. So now you've got him playing expansive football. He's struggling quite a bit. But plus side, the reason I've given him a 6 rather than a 5 or 4, which people have been giving him, he did make a few saves. You know, there was one in the first half, got down low from Ince's shot. There was another one from 30 yards. I think it was a Huddersfield midfielder took a shot. Hennessy was able to save it. So there was a few good saves he made throughout the game, and there was a few times where he parried the ball out. And yes, it was into the danger zone, but at least he made that save. So there was a few good saves there, but really, I can't really blame him for the goals. You know, if we look back at the thing, the only things really I can criticise him for is the fact that he flapped at the first corner of the game. But obviously he flapped it, but then he made up for his mistake by actually, on the second attempt, catching the ball. So at least he didn't fluff it completely and gave possession away. So he he made the mistake, but then he fixed it straight away. And then obviously, late on in the game, Billing had a shot from distance and he held on to that really well. So I don't think there's really too much we can criticise him for, because really the reason we lost 3-0 is because the defence was so exposed, not necessarily about how Hennessy played. But all in all, I think a 6 for Hennessy is a fair result, and certainly I can see him being the first choice goalkeeper. But if a new goalkeeper comes in, you know, we're looking at maybe a few Dutch players, maybe Adrian from West Ham. If these goalkeepers do come in, it's for sure, it's almost certain now that Wayne Hennessy is probably going to be dropped to number 2. And that's not necessarily because of his performances. You know, he hasn't been that bad. Yes, he's had bad games and good games, but he hasn't been that bad. He's been mediocre. But certainly, Wayne Hennessy, he's probably certain to be replaced with a new goalkeeper coming in. Now to move on to the first defender of our back three, and that is Tim Fosu-Mensah, who I'm going to give a 6. The first teenager to start for Crystal Palace in the Premier League since 2005. He was not overruled and put in a steady showing, including a superb last-ditch tackle to deny Mannone in the second half. So obviously Tim Fosu-Mensah here, he only signed earlier this week, and on his first debut for the club he put in a really solid performance. And although we did lose 3-0, out of the 3 defenders he was probably the one who came away with the least blame, because he put in a pretty solid performance, and that's why I've given him a 6. But the stat you've got to look here at is the fact that he's the first teenager to play for Palace in the Premier League since 2005. So that's just showing that how we've never given youngsters a go when we've been in the Premier League. We've always stuck with our experienced players. But Frank de Boer's come in. He's known for playing youngsters. He brought Fosu-Mensah in, and there we've seen a player, a teenager, start for Palace for the first time since 2005. So that's just showing that actually we've been lacking the teenage players coming through. The fact that we've had to wait since 2005 to see a teenager start in the Premier League is quite disturbing. The fact that we're not seeing enough academy players coming through, and yes, he's on loan from Man United, but still the fact remains that he's one of our first teenagers in quite a long time, since 2005, to play in the Premier League. And considering he's only 18, 19, I believe he's 19, 20, you know, he wasn't overawed by it, he wasn't intimidated by it. You know, he's played for Man United, so he's played with that big pressures, and in this game he didn't really show. He put in a steady showing, you know, making tackles left, right and centre, and there was one in the second half, superbly. Mannone was going forth on goal after he ran through the defence, was going to score his hat-trick, or not his hat-trick, but his second goal, I believe it was. No, yeah, it would have been his hat-trick. It would have been made it 4-0. He was going to score the goal, and then Fosu-Mensah running behind him, lovely pace, and managed to make a superb last-ditch tackle to stop him scoring. So, yes, overall he was good, but that tackle in particular was superb. And, you know, if he had scored that goal, like I said, Mannone would have scored the hat-trick, and it would have been even more embarrassing than it was. And it probably would have been more like the Sunderland game last season. But talking about other tackles he made through the game, you know, obviously overall he had a steady showing, but in the first half, nice block on the edge of the box to take out the sting of Cassie Palmer's shot. So obviously in the first half, getting a few blocks in the way to stop Huddersfield having chances. There was a few other, like I said, decent blocks from Maloney, but sometimes, you know, he did look a little bit lost in the game, and that's understandable because he only came to the club on Thursday, so he's only had basically 1 day to train, but we believe he trained beforehand, so maybe 2 or 3 days to train, so he's not going to be completely fitted into the squad yet, and that was understandable. We did see that throughout the game. Obviously he did look a bit lost, but like I said, he was making blocks, he was making tackles, and it was really superb. But I've just got to talk about that again, that superb last ditch tackle. Obviously Scott Dan missed the pass from the midfield. Mannone took the ball off of him, and obviously Fosu-Mensah used that pace to get in behind and just hook the ball away and make that tackle to stop Mannone scoring in the second half. So overall, a really good performance. Obviously, because he's only been at the club for 2 days, we're not sure exactly how long he's trained, but because he's been at the club for only a few days, his fitness is not quite up to the other players. So in the second half, Tompkins came on just to sort of solidify the team, and obviously as soon as Tompkins came on, Huddersfield scored. But I think that's not the fact that Tompkins came on. I think it's just the fact that he's only been on the pitch for a minute and literally he wasn't quite ready for his surroundings. He wasn't quite fitted into the team. Maybe 5 minutes later you saw he slowly grew into the game, but Tompkins, you know, when you've taken Fosu-Mensah, someone who's played really well in the game, you put on Tompkins and then he makes a mistake. But overall, Fosu-Mensah on his debut at Selhurst Park, a really good steady performance and a fair 6. Obviously moving on now to the central defender, and that is Scott Dann, who I'm going to give a 5. The former captain made a great interception to clear the dangerous cross out looking for a corner, but he didn't have his best game in a Palace shirt and spun a golden opportunity to reduce the deficit in the second half. So obviously Scott Dann here, you know, considering we've lost 5-0, a defender's going to have to be blamed at some point, and certainly Scott Dann, he didn't really have the best showing, and that's why I've given him a 5. But, you know, I've said this already, last season with him being the captain, yes, he may have been a good leader in seasons gone past, but when he got given the captaincy, he concentrated too much on the captaincy and he forgot how to play, and he became an even worse player because he wasn't, that sort of distracted him from his defensive roles. But this season, we've seen it in pre-season, the captaincy's been taken away from him and we've seen him become an even better defender because he's not having to worry about captaining the side. And although in this game he wasn't the captain, he had a sort of a shaky game, and that's why I've given him a 5. And some people may give him a 4, maybe a 3, but I've given him a 5, benefit of the doubt, because, you know, in the first half there was a few interceptions he made. You know, when Huddersfield were putting on the pressure, doing this high press game, they were putting in dangerous crosses, and Scott Dann made a few great interceptions, and obviously getting the ball out, clearing it for corners or throw-ins. So yes, he done that, but he didn't really have a best game in the Palace shirt. And, you know, defensively he was a bit shaky, and the only really good thing he done was in the first half with his interceptions. But in the second half, lovely cornering from Patrick Van Aanholt, could have reduced the deficit. You know, Scott Dann, no one was marking him at the back post, and, you know, as he's a defender, you're not going to expect him to have expert shooting, but the ball came to him at his feet and he skied it over. You know, if Scott Dann had taken at least one touch to sort of control the ball or get it lower down, maybe he would have shot and that would have gone in. But, you know, he took one touch straight away, it went over the bar. So if he had taken maybe 1 or 2 touches just to control the ball, then maybe he could have made it 2-1, and maybe we would have been able, like the Leicester game last season, to push on and eventually get the win. But, you know, the 2 really points that I've already discussed just to discuss in more detail, you know, Kagawa, I think its name, Kajuria, I don't know how to say this player's name, but one of the Huddersfield midfielders, Scott Dann, he was through on goal. Scott Dann made a lovely sliding block, obviously poking the ball out, but that would have been 1-0, but unluckily for us, we did go on to lose the game, but that stopped us, that tackle or that block stopped us from conceding at that point. But still, you know, the 2 goals we conceded, question marks are over the organisation for the 2 crosses. So, for example, the first goal, obviously, Joe Ward deflected it in, but Scott Dann really should have been, we know how much of an aerial threat he is, he should have been organising the team and making sure he can jump higher than the strikers to head the ball away. And then for the second goal as well, obviously Riedewald was the one who didn't jump to stop him getting ahead on it, the striker. But what he could have done, Scott Dann, is at least when the ball was coming into him, block it from getting to the player. You know, he could have at least tried to jump in front of the player so he could have got a slight touch at it. But, you know, I think they were lovely crosses, they were really good crosses from Huddersfield, but really the defence should be jumping more, using their aerial presence, because they're really tall. The back line we've got is extremely tall, maybe 6 foot average. You know, they're really tall defenders, but they should have really had the organisation to know where their positions were, and they shouldn't have been zonal marking, they should have been man marking the man so they could, you know, head the ball clear. But to be looking back at the game, you know, yes, he weren't fantastic, and playing this expansive football, he wanted to have more of the ball. You know, playing in the centre of defence, you don't really get as much of the ball as, say, the right and left centre-backs do. But there was times in the game where it looked like he wanted to get the ball so he could put a cross in or try to put a pass into the midfield to try and start something. But although he clearly has been told to stay back, so if you look at the back 3, the left and right centre-backs are the one told to sort of try and play it from the back, while Scott Dann is the main defender in the back 3 in the centre who's been told to stay back. But certainly, if we want to play this expansive football, we've also got to try and involve every player. So Scott Dann, he wanted more of the ball because we know how good his crossfield passes can be. So if you get the ball to him more, not only when you're passing it around the back, get it to him every so often so he can put balls forward. But overall, You know, Scott Dann, not the best game considering how well he's played in pre-season, but I think a 5 is a fair result. Now I'm going to move on to the final player of our back three, and that is the new signing Jaro Riedewald, who I am going to give a 5. Far from the ideal debut for the Dutchman, who given his reputation on the ball with loose and a couple of passes, also beaten in the air by Mounie for the second Huddersfield goal. So obviously Jaro Riedewald here, I've given him a 5, and it's not the best debut here. Unlike Fosu-Mensah, who I thought was a beast in this game, Riedewald didn't really have the best debut, and considering how well he played against Schalke and he played against Metz in pre-season, we were expecting quite a lot from him, and we did see in glimpses, you know, how good he was at passing the ball and some of his crossfield passes, but overall in a defensive sort of look aspect of the game, he didn't really have a really good game. So the first thing really to talk about defensively was Mounie. Obviously the second goal that Huddersfield scored, the ball got whipped into the area, and I've said this already with Scott Dann, the organisation weren't there, so instead of the players man marking, so the each player had their own man, they were zonal marking, and when you're zonal marking you've got to try and run to the player who's going to get the header. By the time Riedewald got to the man, he wasn't able to jump high enough, so Riedewald really in that situation, if it was a Sam Allardyce team, he would have jumped higher than him and headed that away, because really he should have seen Scott Dann should have had a man, Riedewald should have had Mounie, and when the ball was coming in, Riedewald was touch tight to him and was able to head that away. So for Huddersfield's second goal, we could blame him, but we can also blame someone like Joe Ward for letting the cross go in, but I'll talk about that later on. But so defensively, for the second goal, he should have had the organisation, he should have been man marking and should have jumped higher than the striker to head the ball away, which is something we've done last season really well. So considering we've got this massive height within the side now, we've got all players who are over 6 foot, I believe. We've got this height in the team now, so now we've got to make it count by when aerial duels come in. We need to make ourselves higher than the opponents. But other than that, yes, he was all right on the ball, you know, trying to play it from the back, and he did stick to the tactics. He did try and play it from the back, but still there was a few loose passes here and there. So we saw in pre-season how well he was at passing the ball and making a few tackles here and there. But in this game, maybe because of the pressure of the Premier League and because Huddersfield were putting us under so much pressure, but certainly a few loose balls here and there, you know, not ideal when you're considered to be a really, really good Dutch defender with a good reputation for playing it from the back. But really, I think, yeah, we can't really blame him too much because he's still getting used to it, and because he's come, unlike Fosu-Mensah, who's played in the Premier League before, Riedewald hasn't played in the Premier League, so it's going to take him a little while to adapt. But certainly on this performance there were good things we saw, but also very bad things we saw, and obviously that's why we did lose 3-0, because the defence weren't playing up to scratch. But you know, a few times, talking about loose balls, there was a few times where he put a sloppy back pass to Wayne Hennessy. So Wayne Hennessy already doesn't have a lot of confidence when the back three or back four in front of him aren't really confident. So in this game, the back three weren't very confident, meaning when Hennessy was put under pressure with these sloppy back passes, it did put him under quite a lot of pressure. But you know, really, he did look like he wasn't ready for the pace of the Premier League, which is understandable. But even if it was against a newly promoted side, you still got to be up to that quality. And the fact that we've played teams like Metz, like Schalke, who play a high press game, you know, we should have really been prepared for that. But Riedewald, I've given him a 5, you know, not the best debut from him, you know, we did expect more from him considering how well he's played in pre-season and how well, you know, he played for Ajax last season. But certainly, given his reputation on the ball, he needs to try and be better on the ball, stop doing sloppy passes here and there, and also just try and put a little bit more height into the team. So he's really, really tall, so now he's got to actually try and man mark players and obviously get higher than them to head the ball away. But other than that, other than them two things I picked up, not the ideal debut, but certainly not the worst. Obviously moving on now to the right wing back, and that is Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 5. He was unfortunate to see the ball go off him for Huddersfield's opener. Did well to prevent Tom Ince adding a third, but didn't look comfortable at right wing back. So obviously Joe Ward here, I've given him a 5, and loads of people may slate me in the comments for giving him a 5 because he probably was one of the worst players on the pitch. But talking about Huddersfield's first goal, yes, it was a Joe Ward own goal, but I think he was quite unlucky because the ball was coming into the area, it went into the front post, got headed over to the back post. There was a bit of a scuffle, and I think 2 Huddersfield players got a touch, and as they kicked it in, Joe Ward tried to clear it off the line and it came off him. So it was going on target anyway, so I suppose they could call it a Huddersfield goal, but I think they've called it an own goal because ultimately Joe Ward did get the final touch. But I think he was quite unlucky there because he was put under pressure. I'll talk about again zonal marking. There were two players around Joe Ward where really man marking from corners. There should be a man on each player to stop things like that happening. So there was two players down around Joe Ward, which isn't really ideal for him. And also, he was under pressure. He hasn't played for most of pre-season, so you can understand him trying to making a few mistakes because he's still not up to scratch, and that's certainly true, but I think he's not really up to the quality anymore. And considering that he played at right wing back, he totally does not fit that role. He's not a right wing back, he's a right back, and in this game with him playing there he got exposed quite a lot. But other than them bad things he done defensively, scoring the own goal, people running rings around him, running past him constantly. In the second half, Tom Ince, I believe it was in the first half, Tom Ince ran through on goal, was about to add a third goal just before half time, and Joe Ward made a superb tackle, much like Fosu Mensah's in the second half, managed to get in front of him, hook the ball away, and we managed to clear the danger. But so he done that really well, and he was unlucky to score the own goal. But overall in the game he didn't really look comfortable at right back. In the first half it really summed up how he didn't look comfortable, the fact that he scored the own goal. And then Aaron Moy, because he was playing at right wing back, he's not normally used to playing there. Aaron Moy went straight past him because Joe Ward was playing too high up the pitch when Huddersfield were counter-attacking. And Aaron Moy was allowed to put the cross in for the second goal. And really, in my opinion, we need to bring back Andros Townsend. I don't know why. Maybe he was injured before the game. Maybe he came late to the game. There are a few rumours. But Andros Townsend should have been starting this game because as he's shown in pre-season, he's a much better right wing back than Joe Ward has been. And that's because Joe Ward, he's always played as a right back or in midfield. So playing as a right wing back, where you've got to make sure that if you're running forward, you need to make sure you have the pace, which he doesn't. And when you're running back, he needs to track back with the team, which he didn't because he was playing in the right wing back role. He, when he should have been going forward, he was staying quite far back, and when he was meant to go back, he was staying far too forward. So in that respect, he hasn't quite got the gist of the right wing back role. And I certainly, like many fans, would like to see Townsend come back into the side. But other than them few little things he'd done, the fact that he was playing too far forward, too far back, having a bit of a mess of the first half, scoring the first goal and letting people run rings around him, we must congratulate him for that and give him an extra mark for that superb tackle. Huddersfield would have made it 3-0. That would have been a complete and utter humiliation, but luckily Joe Ward was able to save himself, and many people would give him a 4. I did contemplate giving him a 4 because he was at fault for some of the goals, but he's not as at fault for all of the goals as he was at fault for all of the goals, but not as much as say Reedwald was for not jumping. But really, just to really sum up his game, I've given him a 5. It really just was a game to forget for Joe Ward. So hopefully in the next few games, especially against Liverpool's pace, I would like to see Joe Ward drop to the bench and bring Andros Townsend in again, because his pace and his awareness of the game is certainly better than Joe Ward's when he was playing at right wing back. Now I'm going to move on to the captain and centre mid of the team, and that is Jason Puncheon, who I'm going to give a 5. Started off brightly, but his influence faded on his 150th appearance for the Eagles. Better in the second half, but not his best display. So obviously Jason Puncheon here, I've given him a 5, and like I said there, at the beginning of the game, in the sort of first 15 minutes before we conceded a goal, he played really well and he started quite brightly and probably was one of the better players in the team, playing in that centre mid role. He was trying to create stuff for his team. But as the game went on, unlike what happened last season where he had an influence throughout the whole game, playing as the captain, his influence sort of faded as the game went on, and it was almost as if he was non-existent by the end of the game, because the likes of Loftus-Cheek and Wilf Zaha and Fosu Mensah were taking the bright lights of the team, because Jason Puncheon faded and it was almost like he wasn't even on the pitch because he weren't creating anything in the midfield. But certainly 150th appearance for Palace, so congratulations to him for getting to that milestone, and certainly he deserves all the appearances he's had, considering when he signed for us how important he was in that first season keeping us up. But I don't think anymore he's got the quality to start in a team. Yes, he's a really good player, and I think he's the perfect squad player. He's a player who's got the quality to starting a starting 11 but isn't the best player. So he's too good for the bench, but he isn't quite good enough for the team. And I think he'd be the perfect squad player. And like John Terry or Wayne Rooney at Man United last season, they don't have to be on the pitch to be the captain and to have influence on the team. So people who say that Puncheon has to start because he's the captain, I don't think that should be the case, because we've seen in this game that maybe Milivojevic and maybe Loftus-Cheek, they could be the perfect midfield partnership. You've got a defensive person in Milivojevic, and you've got the offensive / someone who can play quite deep in Loftus-Cheek. So if Puncheon, I personally think he's not performing to the standard he should be, maybe he should be put on the bench and have that influence in the dressing room rather than playing on the pitch and not having an influence at all when in there. But much like the whole team in the second half, we came out so much better. We were creating chances for Benteke, for Zaha. So we were creating chances as the game went on, but it wasn't his best display. We know how good he can be on his day when he's playing in that role, when he's controlling the game. But in this game, his influence completely faded, and not involved enough is a phrase we could use. With him playing in the centre mid role, all the balls from the defence should be coming to him and he should be setting up attacks. But in this game, he wasn't involved enough. And like I said already, like the whole team, he improved in the second half. But obviously, quite often, because Huddersfield were playing quite a high press, he found himself quite crowded out. There was too many players around him, and all he could really do is pass the ball back. So he wasn't really creating and being that sort of bright spark who could get the attacks going. But, I think if he's not given a game time he wants, so if he's not given a chance on the ball, then he can't make things happen. So if he's crowded by players playing a high press, he can't really create, and maybe we need another person playing. But certainly Jason Puncheon, as the captain, I've given him a 5, and although he started great, he sort of faded towards the end of the game, came slightly better in the second half, but overall was quite non-existent in the game, didn't really control the midfield as he has done in the past. Obviously, moving on now to his midfield partner, and that is Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 6. Back in the middle, but was in the end of some physical challenges and was a little overrun as the Huddersfield took grip of the game. So obviously Luka here, I've given him a 6, and considering he was taken off at half time, I think he was probably one of the better, not the worst, not the best player, but one of the better players playing in the first half, and I can't really blame him for any of the goals we conceded. So in that respect, the 45 minutes he played, he actually done alright in it. But playing back in the midfield where he hasn't played all pre-season, other than sort of a few, maybe 30 minutes in the game against West Brom, playing back in the midfield, it was a really physical game, and he struggled with that. And maybe that's because he's not used to playing in midfield, because the last sort of 5 weeks he's been playing as a defender, and that's what happens when you change a player's position. They may look okay there, but when they go back to their best position, it may take them some getting used to. And that's certainly what we saw with Luka in this game, is the fact that, yes, he's really good centre midfielder, which we saw last season, but in this game, because he was so used to playing defensive centre back in pre-season, it affected the way he played. But certainly, where I said there was lots of physical challenges, Huddersfield playing that high press game, he did sort of look a bit overrun in the midfield, much like Puncheon. Because they were restricting him to chances, it looked like he was a little bit overrun, and because Huddersfield had the grip of the game, it meant that Luka couldn't have as many chances as he would have liked. But in the first half, the 45 minutes he played before he got taken off, which apparently was a tactical move, but I think it was more an injury move as well, because it looked like he was holding his hamstring, and he's a crucial player, so we don't want him to get an injury, we don't want to risk anything. But in the first half, he broke up loads of attacks, but like I said, found himself on the receiving end of loads of tough challenges from Huddersfield players, and spent most of the time of that half walking around gingerly. So like I said, Frank de Boer said it was a tactical change bringing him on at half time, or bringing him off at half time, but I think it was just to protect him, because like I said, they're Huddersfield playing that high press, they kept putting tackles in him and Wilf, and obviously he came out on the wrong end of it and ended up getting injured with his hamstring. So hopefully it isn't nothing too serious, but certainly he played really well in the game, tried to break up attacks, but when he kept getting tackled from left, right and centre, it obviously took its toll, and he ended up walking around for most of the half quite gingerly. But like I said, came off at half time after all of Huddersfield's fouls all culminated together, and obviously they took their toll. They certainly took their they made him go off injured. The fact that they kept tackling him, they got rid of a key player from the game. then ultimately overall it took its toll. But certainly a 6 from him. I'm not going to say he was the worst player on the pitch. He wasn't the best, but if he wasn't on the receiving ends of all of these harsh challenges and tackles, I don't think it was tactical. I think he could have played for the rest of the game and maybe had a little bit more influence like we know he can have. Obviously, moving on now to the final player of our midfield, and that is the left-hand side wing-back, and that is Patrick Van Aanholt, who I'm going to give a 5. Tried to get up and down the left-hand side as much as possible, but his delivery from set pieces was poor at times. So obviously Patrick Van Aanholt here, I've given him a 5, and much like the whole of the defence and most in the midfield, he sort of had an off game, and considering how well he played in the Schalke game, especially when he was linking up with Wilfried Zaha, I was quite looking forward to seeing Van Aanholt and Zaha linking up on that sort of left hand side of the attack. And with him playing in the wing back role, the thing that made him better than Ward is he knew when to go forward, so he knew when to link up with the attackers, and unlike Ward, he knew when he had to go back and defend. So that's what Patrick Van Aanholt done. He was running up and down the flank, he got back because he's got the pace to do so, which Ward doesn't have. Because he's got that pace, he's able to track back and defend and also go forward. So he tried to get up and down that left hand side as much as possible, and for some reason he was taking set pieces, and that's probably because Puncham wasn't able to do it, because maybe his set pieces aren't good enough to flank the ball, and also because Luca was off the pitch, because normally Luca this season would be taking the penalties, would be taking the free kicks, but in this game Patrick Van Aanholt did it. There was only one good free kick where he lovely whipped ball into the area, Benteke headed it, and there was a really good save. So other than that, his delivery from the set plays and the set pieces weren't good enough, but I think he was another player who wasn't involved enough. So he had the right ideas, so running up and down the flanks, trying to attack but also get back and defend, and he was making sure he could make tackles and trying man mark the players. Unlike other players who were zonal marking, when he was going back and defending, he was making sure he was tight to the man to make sure they couldn't get crosses and stuff in. So he done alright in that one. He tried to break forward as much as possible in the second half, so with us chasing the game, he tried to go forward, and he did use his pace to our advantage, but obviously with us pushing so far forward to go and try and get a consolation goal or an equaliser, it meant that we ended up chasing the game, and obviously it left holes in the team. So although I said that Joe Ward, he left holes in the team because he's not used to playing at right wing back and he was too far forward or too far back, Patrick Van Aanholt, yes, he had that balance right. He had the balance to go forward and when to go back, but the bad thing about it is when we were chasing the game, he was going too far forward. But luckily for us, nothing really came from his side, left hand side of the defence, because obviously he was able to use his pace to track back, and this is what exactly happened in the second half. Yes, he used his pace to get back, but in the second half, when we conceded the third goal, a ball over the top of the defence, and obviously it was just a simple long ball from Huddersfield over the top, and because there was so much space, because Patrick Van Aanholt was trying to push to get the consolation goal, it meant that we did concede a third goal. But ultimately, Patrick Van Aanholt, yes, he wasn't involved as he would have liked to have been, as he's been, say, in the Schalke game. But I've given him a 5 because I thought we had the right intent. He was attacking the left-hand side really well. He was going back and defending reasonably well. But I've given him a 5 just because when we were chasing the game, instead of being more cautious when he was going forward, he was going forward so much, which was great. But it meant that we left gaps at the back, and that's obviously when we went to go on and concede the third goal. But Patrick Van Aanholt, a 5, I think is a fair result. Now I'm going to move on to the front three which started the game, starting off with Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I'm going to give an 8. One major plus for Palace as he was involved in most of the Eagles' good play, providing a link between midfield and attack in the first half and showing his tenacity and passing range in the second. So obviously Ruben Loftus-Cheek here, is very unusual that when you do lose to 3-0 to any team, especially a promoted team, that you get a player who gets given an 8. But Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who we've signed on loan from Chelsea, in pre-season he's looked fantastic, doing outside of the foot passes by controlling the midfield, linking up the attack and the midfield. He was doing everything really, really well in pre-season, and he carried this on into this game. And if you look at the game as a whole, for Palace, he was probably the main person creating all of the chances, and probably was the only sort of positive for Palace, other than the fact that Fosu Mensah looked pretty good, and the fact that Wilfried Zaha got a few chances, but not as good as Loftus-Cheek was. But like I've said already, he was sort of involved in all of the Eagles' good plays. So everything we done good, especially in the first sort of 15 minutes of the game, and also sort of from the 60th minute onwards in the second half. All of our good play when we were attacking really well, creating loads of chances, most of it was due to Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And he did start the game playing as one of the front three, so obviously playing alongside Wilfried Zaha and Benteke. But in the second half, he was brought back deep, so playing in a midfield role next to Punchin, which meant that he could pick up the ball from deep and then spread the ball far forward. And that's far better than him playing up front, because if we don't give the service to him, we won't see how good he was. And although he created a few chances in the first half, he wasn't as good as he was in the second half. Because like I said, in the second half, he'd pick up the ball from deep and create chances for someone like Zaha or someone like Benteke, rather than in the first half where he was playing up front and he had to be the one to receive the chances, but there was no one in the midfield to do that. But you know, a word I used quite a lot towards the end of last season was tenacity. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, although we did lose the game 3-0, he showed tenacity throughout the game, and also his passing range. You know, we talked about how Kabay last season against West Brom, his passing range for Zaha's goal was fantastic. Milivojevic in pre-season, his passing range was fantastic. But in this game, Ruben Loftus-Cheek was the best passer of the ball. You know, Punchin was sort of meant in the first half and was meant to be that player, and because he didn't make any or attempt to do any long range passes, we didn't create as many opportunities as we would have liked. But in the second half, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, because he came back into midfield and played from deep, he was the man creating these opportunities, playing these lovely passes, really long range passes, and all of them were pretty accurate. There was no balls which were overhit or underhit. They all went to their player, whether they be short passes or be long passes. So that's a really good thing. And the one that they highlighted on Match of the Day, which was absolutely fantastic, it was much like the one against Schalke, outside of the foot, picked up the ball from deep, outside of the foot, passed it to Zaha, and obviously Zaha got tackled by a Huddersfield player. But the fact that he's able to create these chances is fantastic. And if we get a proper right wing back in, that means that Townsend can move up to the role where Ruben Loftus-Cheek started the game, and that means Loftus-Cheek can make the most impact from his best position, which is in the midfield. But really, you know, I've given him the 8. He was Palace's most positive player, you know, breaking forward with the ball in the first half, beating men, dribbling out, but quite often in the first half, yes, he was really good at getting the ball forward, moving the ball, you know, bringing the team forward and starting attacks. But his downside is, because Huddersfield were playing a high press game, he often got shut out quite a lot. He often got sort of crowded out. So maybe looking back at it, maybe he isn't a player like Wilfried Zaha who can dribble through players, but maybe he's the guy who can bring the full ball forward, start the attacks, and then spread the ball, rather than being the player who can dribble past 5 players and score a goal. And really, I've talked about his long pass already. You know, much like Fosu Mensah when he made a lovely sliding tackle, there was one where Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Huddersfield on the counter-attack, he managed to get in behind, get the ball out with a tackle, got up really quickly and spread the ball to Zaha quick, because Huddersfield were counter-attacking, so there was space there for Zaha to go through and go. And like I said, Zaha obviously got the fans on his feet. He made a lovely powerful run, but obviously he got tackled at the last minute. But you know, really the final thing really to talk about his performance. I've given him an 8, and really that was the only rare positive for Palace, because no other player got more than a 6 in this game, and that's purely because there was only one standout player for me, and that was Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And I'll go on to talk about the best 4 players in the man of the match section later on. But Ruben Loftus-Cheek, an 8 from him, a very good game, and I think that's a fair result. Now to move on to Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 6. Was kept quiet in the first half by Huddersfield's aggressive press, but it still tried to make things happen for Palace, even on an off day. So obviously Wilfried Zaha here, I've given him a 6, and much like I said for Milivojevic earlier on in the podcast, he wasn't the worst player on the pitch, but certainly he was no way the best player on the pitch. And considering how well he's been playing in pre-season and the end of last season, it's understandable we can be a little bit disappointed with the way he played. But as a whole, I think we can be disappointed, and really, yeah, disappointed with the whole team and the way they performed. And when the whole team doesn't perform and doesn't provide, someone like Wilfried Zaha with the talent he's got, they don't get the chances that they really deserve. But really, Wilfried Zaha, Huddersfield playing that really high press game. Zaha wasn't able to get forward as much as he would have liked. You know, Huddersfield playing really aggressive, doing that really high press, meant that whenever Zaha got the ball, he tried to drive forward, really powerful runs he tried to make, but most of the time he got bullied off the ball, or got pushed off the ball, or tackled off the ball, whatever way you want to look at it. And that's purely because of how aggressive and how well Huddersfield were defending. But the fact is, unlike all of the other players in the team, maybe excluding Loftus-Cheek, Zaha was always trying to create something. So even though he was putting under pressure, getting kicked left, right and centre, he still tried to make things happen for Palace. And even though it was an off day for him, even though he knew he wasn't up to his normal standards, he wasn't doing as much trickery or as much passing or as much crossing as he would have liked, he still tried. And that's the thing, you know, we've got someone like Punchin, who in the midfield, he could have tried to put the ball forward, but he wasn't really playing up to scratch, whereas Zaha, much like Punchin, wasn't playing as well as he could do. But unlike Punchin, he actually tried to make things happen. And if you look in the first half, you know, within the first minute, he got a free kick. So just showing that from the off, he made a lovely, powerful run, got tackled, and then we obviously won the free kick. And that's what he'd done throughout the game. He kept winning free kicks, which was really good. But if we had a proper free kick taker, and the fact that Luca went off injured, you know, meant we didn't. If we had Luca on the pitch, maybe we could have taken a bigger advantage from these free kicks. But like I've said already, I've given him a 6. It's not the best performance from him, but certainly not the worst. But if you look back at the game, spent most of his time getting fouled by the Huddersfield players, and that was clearly their tactic. Like West Brom in pre-season, they wanted to stop him, and then the whole team wouldn't function. But I don't think that's necessarily going to stop us from attacking, because as shown by Ruben Loftus-Cheek, it's not only Zaha who's the best attacking threat, but I think if you stop Zaha when the team isn't working well, and when the team aren't supplying him, then the fact that he's not being supplied, and the fact that he's not given the opportunities to go forward because Huddersfield defending, then that's going to cause an even bigger problem, because you've got 2 problems as opposed to 1 with him being defended against really well. And you know, if you look back at the game, I'm not going to moan too much about this because it's going to see me as a sore loser, but he could have had a penalty on another day when he made a powerful run into the box, got taken down. That could have been a penalty. Looking back at the replays, I'm sort of 60% towards it wasn't a penalty and 40% towards it was a penalty. You know, he was, you know, the player, don't think he got the ball because Zaha got the final touch on the ball, but he did make a tackle of him in the box and did take him down. And it was unlucky to see another another shot he'd done, a well drive saved by Lawson in the Huddersfield goal. And I talked about that in the earlier on in the podcast. We did have chances, you know, and that chance was a clear example. We ran through on goal, lovely pass from the midfield, and it just shows when the midfield supply the attackers, we can create chances. And in that case, we created a chance. Zaha went to hit it in the far corner, and although it went out for a goal kick, the goalkeeper actually got a touch. And if he didn't get that touch, it may have trickled into the bottom corner, or maybe it would have come off the far post for someone like Benteke to punt it in. But Wilfried Zaha, not his best performance, but like I said, like Luca's performance, he wasn't the best, wasn't the worst. And hopefully next weekend, if we change the system and we do a little bit of work on the training ground, we can see an even better performance from him then. Obviously moving on now to the final player of our starting 11, and that is Christian Benteke, who I'm going to give a 6. Was almost anonymous in the first half, but came close with a superb header early in the second half, as Palace looked to get back into the game. So obviously Christian Benteke here, I've given him a 6, and much like Wilf, much like Luca, I keep saying this, there were certain players who weren't necessarily really bad and weren't at fault for anything from the game, but they certainly at least tried, but they weren't the best players throughout the game, and Christian Benteke was an exact example of that. So much like Zaha in the first half, where Huddersfield's high press was stopping us from getting forward, Christian Benteke, because of that, he was almost anonymous in the first half. So obviously we lost that half 2-0, and Christian Benteke didn't really have any chances to get a consolation goal at that point. But early in the second half, a lovely free kick, I believe it was either a free kick or a corner from Patrick Van Aanholt onto Benteke, lovely powerful header, but obviously the Huddersfield goalkeeper made a superb save. So in the first half, very quiet. In the second half, when we supplied him, so he was still quiet in the second half, but when you supplied him with a chance, he was able to, you know, use his skills, and how we know how good he is. He used his skills to prove how good he is, but unluckily for us, Huddersfield goalkeeper made a really good save. And obviously, early in the second half, when we were trying to push, trying to get back into the game, with the likes of Zaha, Loftus-Cheek, he was sort of one of the more positive players who were actually trying to do something for Palace. But, you know, I've said this already, superb header early in the second half. He had a few other headed chances where he nodded wide. There was another one. But, you know, Lawson, I believe it is, or Lossell in the Huddersfield goal, he was in really good form. He made a really good save from that one. There was another header early in the game where he made a save. So if Benteke, had made, had that header in and he saved it, and instead of it going out for a corner, it would have been, side-footed in by another player, let's say, maybe we would have drawn the game, or we would have got a consolation goal. But the fact that Benteke was still remained positive, still had these chances, and it was just quite unlucky that the goalkeeper made these saves. And there was another chance as well where the ball got whipped in by Loftus-Cheek. He got on the end of it, and unluckily for him, as he went to take it, he got tackled. So that was an unlucky chance. So he had chances to get us back into the game, but unluckily for us, nothing really came off of it. But much like Zaha, much like Luca, these players in the team who weren't at fault for anything that happened, and they at least tried throughout the game, but they were nowhere near the quality we'd expect from them this season. Obviously, moving on now to the two substitutes, and that is Andros Townsend and James Tompkins. So, obviously, Andros Townsend came on at half-time for Milivojevic. I don't think this was a tactical move, which Frank de Boer said, but even if it was a tactical move, it did work well because we played much better in the second half. But if I was Frank de Boer, I would definitely start Andros Townsend in the next game, because with him playing at that right wing back role, he was absolutely superb in pre-season. So unless we get a right wing back within the next 3 weeks of the transfer window, then we're going to have problems there. But he came on at half-time for Milivojevic. I think it was because Milivojevic had a slight hamstring injury, and I'm hoping it was because of that, because it was precautionary, because obviously if it was a proper bad hamstring injury, he would have been stretchered off. So the fact that he was able to come off the pitch means that it's probably not that serious of an injury, but it's good that we didn't take the risk. But whatever it was, whether it was the injury or the fact that it was tactical, Andros Townsend came on for Milivojevic, and he made a completely made a massive difference on the team. In the second half, created a good chance for Benteke, which when he crossed the ball into Benteke, that's the one I just mentioned, he got the ball, tried to have a shot, and he got tackled at the last minute and the ball went out. So he was unlucky with that chance. You could say he should have connected with it early, but as he went to connect with it, he got tackled. So that was unlucky. And really, he is an England international, so we know Andros Townsend has got the quality. So he injected some oomph into the team, let's say, to the Palace attack, which meant that we moved Loftus-Cheek back into the midfield. So Loftus-Cheek was creating for the attackers, which meant that Andros Townsend was getting on the end of these lovely opportunities created by Loftus-Cheek, and almost, had a few chances to get us back into the game. And, that's what we were missing in the first half. Yes, Zaha's a great attacking threat, but Loftus-Cheek isn't really a winger, so we want him to be playing a central midfield role. So when he moved back there, it meant that Andros Townsend was a much better threat down that right hand side than Loftus-Cheek was in the first half. And then James Tompkins, I've given him a 6. Not really. I could give him no rating because I think he didn't really have that much impact. He came on for Fosu-Mensah, played in the back three, and I think that was just sort of a late substitution just for the fitness reasons and the fact that Fosu-Mensah hasn't played for a while and he's only been at Palace for a few days. But he came on just before Huddersfield added their third goal, and that obviously killed the game off. And you could say that he should have done better because he was the man marking it. But when you've literally just put on the pitch, the first action, you're not expected to see a player running towards you. You'd expect to sort of get into the game, know where your defensive positions are. But unluckily for us, he was the man who had to mark the Huddersfield player. He got past him to score. But other than that, much like Dan, he had a chance to score late on in the game. A corner came in and he volleyed it just over the bar. So if Palace, obviously with us looking to try and get something from the game, if he had scored that chance, it would have been a consolation. If Benteke's header hadn't been saved, we would have probably drawn the game. But we're not really going to talk about that. We're just going to talk about really the fact that we lost this game. It was quite embarrassing, really. But hopefully, the next few weeks, the next few games even, we're slowly get used to this formation and this sort of system we're playing. And certainly we've got some of the players to do it. So, for example, we've got Benteke, we've got Zaha, we've got someone like Van Aanholt who can play this system. We now need a few more players. Like, we need a right wing back who can play this position. We need someone who, like a goalkeeper, for example, who can actually play this system. Because Hennessy, yes, he was alright, but we need someone to play that system. And that's the thing. Townsend came on the pitch. Yes, he's really good at right back, but when he played forward, he showed how good he was. So if we can get a right wing back in and then play Townsend up front, it'll be even better for us. But certainly substitutions done all right. But Tompkins, don't really know why he came on, and I'm not really going to blame him for the third goal because you've literally just come on the pitch and your first thing is the midfield made a mistake and you're put one-on-one with a player. But I'll give him a 6. He done all right. Now, really, just to summarise the game, this isn't the start of the season that we would have wanted, A 3-0 loss to a newly promoted side, Huddersfield side. Yes, they were good last season, but put that aside, we should have really, with the experience we've got in the side and the fact that we've got all this skill and we've got this experience, we should really at least be drawing this game. But it is really disappointing that we lost the game. But I personally think, the way I'm looking at it, there's still 37 games to go over the season, so there's a long way to go, and there's still transfers to come in. I think maybe 3 or 4 players might come in the next sort of 2-3 weeks. But still, I think it could be like the Sunderland game last season. So a game where we got demolished 4-0, and this is the game which clearly shows the weaknesses in the team. So the fact that we lost, yes, you may see it's bad. We're bottom of the league, we're on 0 points, but actually, if you look at it in my pessimistic view, actually it might be a positive thing, because it shows the weaknesses of the team. And so instead of you having to try and work out what the weaknesses are and how to improve, you can see what they are clearly, which means in training this week the team can realise what they need to do better and then back up their ideas. And it could give Frank de Boer an idea of how to improve the team for the upcoming game. So we saw how Ward got exposed at right wing back. That's a really good thing. Obviously it's not good because we lost the game, but it's a good thing because it now shows de Boer that actually Joe Ward isn't good enough to play in that right wing back role. And now that Frank de Boer either has to buy a right wing back or buy another winger and then move Andros Townsend back there. But like I said already, new signings needed. We need a goalkeeper because Hennessy and Speroni, yes, they're all right, but they're not good enough to play this system at the back. Like I said already, a right wing back, we need someone who can play there, or we get another winger and then move Townsend back to right wing back. And also we need a backup for Benteke, because in this game, towards the end of the game, maybe instead of bringing Tompkins on, we could have brought on maybe another attacker to try and push on in the game. Because even if you take a defender off, you move to a back 4 and then you can play 4-4-2. And when we're playing that system, if we get another striker, that gives us another option. But really, just looking back at the game, Huddersfield wanting the game more than Palace. They had that oomph, they had that power, determination to try and get their first Premier League point. They've done that. Their pressing style doesn't really suit Palace's style, so our style is really good at playing around teams like West Brom, for example, who play sort of classic football, your traditional way of playing. But when you've got someone like Huddersfield who play really high pressure, 3 at the back doesn't work because you've got 1 less defender, which means you're put under pressure more. And for me, really, the 2 goals which weren't own goals, the own goal side, the thing that we need to concentrate on is the 2 mistakes were from the set pieces. So zonal marking should never be used in the Premier League because players have got speed, they've got that agility to run around a player. So what they need to improve on for the game against Liverpool is actually by having not zonal marking, but actual man marking, making sure that each player has their man, because that way, for example, use Riedewald. When the ball comes in, Riedewald won't have to run to see to the player who he thinks is going to get the ball. He'll know that man's going to get the ball. I'm marking him, so I'll make sure I'll try to my best ability to make sure he can't get the ball. So if we have that sort of mindset, then certainly we're improved. But even though we did sort of improve in the second half, it wasn't enough for Palace, and because obviously Premier League new balls, they've got that determination. The own goal from Joe Wood was unfortunate, but the 2 other goals were results of the 2 mistakes defensively we made. And certainly, congratulations to Huddersfield on getting their first 3 points, but it was an overall disappointing game from Palace. So now I'm going to move on to the Man of the Match award, but before I do that and give you my Man of the Match, I'm just going to give you the 4 nominations who I thought were the best players throughout the game. And I must mention, we did lose 3-0, but these are the players I thought were the best throughout the game, and the players who at least tried. And I mentioned that in the player ratings. There were some players like Punchin who weren't that good in the game, they weren't that bad, but they didn't try to do something in the game. Whereas these 4 players I've picked, they weren't brilliant, but they at least tried, and they showed that determination and grit throughout the game. So I'm just going to go through who I voted on the nominations, then I'm going to give you why I put them on there, and then I'll give you the results of the Twitter poll. So to start off, Timothy Fosu-Mensah playing as the right centre back, Ruben Loftus-Cheek playing as one of the forwards and also playing as the centre mid, Andros Townsend who came on at half time, and obviously Wilfried Zaha. So just to go through, I've put them on there. Timothy Fosu-Mensah, out of all of the 3 defenders in the back 3, he was the best defender there, and that last ditch tackle alone is why I've put him on there. Ruben Loftus-Cheek for his you know, his energy he had in the game, the fact that he was trying to create opportunities, the fact that he's got that long range passing, all the things like that he'd done throughout the game, his attacking threat, things like that is why I've put him on there. Andros Townsend as well, I've said this already, he came on the pitch at half time, made a massive influence to the second half, and although we didn't win the game, he certainly tried to at least get us something from the game, whether it be a consolation goal or something to get us into the game. And certainly next week I can see him starting. And then Wilfried Zaha, you know, Zaha, he was probably in the first half one of the best players, trying to go forward, trying to create opportunities, trying to get through on goal, and he could have scored but the goalkeeper made a save. So there was a few chances he had, and if it weren't for Huddersfield doing as high press as they do, playing that style, he probably would have had more opportunities to go on and score. But just to go over the Twitter polls, in 4th place with 5% of the votes was Andros Townsend. Closely followed up with 7% of the votes was Wilfried Zaha, which means in 2nd place with 10% of the votes was Timothy Fosu-Mensah, and with an incredible 78% of the votes was Ruben Loftus-Cheek for this week's Man of the Match. So congratulations, Ruben. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was a solid debut from you, and certainly you were clear to me as one of the players who were at least trying to create something from the game. And Chelsea have let you go to Palace on loan, and you do look like a star talent, so Chelsea will be the ones to miss out this season. But do comment below in the YouTube comments or contact us on Twitter at eCrystalPalace with who you thought the man of the match was from the game against Huddersfield. But now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match, that concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Frank de Boer and Ruben Loftus-Cheek following the game.
A tough result to take today. What do you feel went wrong in the first half?
No, I just think 2 goals that we don't want to really be conceding as a team. You know, it's just concentration on set pieces, and it's so big in football. You've seen over the yesterday a lot of goals from set pieces going in, and sometimes set pieces decide the game. So you have to be concentrated throughout, and we got to learn from it today.
Huddersfield very aggressive in the midfield. Was it a tough battle out there?
Yeah, definitely. I think we expected that. Them coming up from the Championship and wanting to make a statement. So we needed to match them, but obviously not today. But we'll pick our heads up and go again.
Change position at half time. Did you feel a bit more comfortable in the second half, coming from deep and charging forward?
Oh, I'm comfortable in both. It was just I just felt a bit. The ball wasn't. Not getting the ball to feet in the first half. So it was hard to create chances. But moved back into midfield. But it doesn't matter where I play. You just want to give 100%, and we'll go again.
And do you think the important thing was when it was 2-0, those chances we had were quite important?
Yeah, I think in football you don't get a lot of chances sometimes, and you need to execute. When you get the chances, you have to be clinical. And we did have a few chances today. To be fair, the keeper made a great save off Benteke's head. But it wasn't our day today.
Thanks, Ruben.
Was it a harsh lesson into the introduction of the Premier League?
Yeah, you can call that. Of course, it's a very false start for everybody. Everybody had a different view on that, of course, to start like this, but to start off like this. Nobody expected it, of course. It's a very hard lesson for everybody, for me, staff, the players. Because especially on the highest level, football will always decide a lot of times with details, and I think we lost the game in 50 minutes. We started quite well, I think, and then after 10 minutes, we make the wrong choices, and we were pulled back, and from there they get a corner, and they were the team who had the most opportunities at that moment, but it was just of making the wrong decisions at that moment, in my point of view. So, and after 50 minutes, they understand, we had trained on that, and we did exactly what we supposed to do at that moment, and then we had the control of the game again, and we created our chances. And just until the 3-0, we were very close a lot of times to make the 2-1. And I think if we make the 2-1 then, or the 1-2, then I have a very big confidence that we're gonna at least get a point out of here. You take risk, of course, but I saw some very good things. But we have to understand that a game doesn't last 75 minutes. It's maybe 95 or 98 minutes. And if you just in those 50 minutes don't do what the game asks from you to do at that moment, you get punished, and we get punished hard from Huddersfield, and it's a good compliment for Huddersfield because we knew that they play like this, and at the end, when you win 3-0, you deserve to win, and again a compliment to Huddersfield.
Frank, did your team have enough desire today, do you think? It looked to me like Huddersfield came right from the kick-off and wanted the game more than Palace.
No, I don't agree on that, but I think we started quite well. I think there are two dangerous moments on our left side. And after that, they pressed us, yes. But then you have to make the right decisions at that moment. And in my point of view, we didn't do that. And then looks that they have more aggression. But after the 50 minutes, I think we showed that also we had aggression. But again, when you're then 2-0 down, it's very hard, against a very organized team to get back in the game.
Any other questions?
Frank, you said that wasn't what you were expecting. Was there anything about Huddersfield or English football that surprised you?
No, not at all. I think they played that we were expected. We analyzed them well. We showed the players well, and it was exactly what they showed in the last season, but also in the pre-matches they played. So there was no surprise. We didn't do at that moment what we normally should have done. So then. Again, and at that moment they punish you right at that right time, and normally sometimes you're gonna escape on that, but we didn't, and then you're running down the score. I don't know how you call it. You're 2-0 down, and then it's of course every team is very good organized, and if you make a quick goal, then the crowd's coming behind you. You get the energy, maybe back again. When you're 2-0 down, of course, it's a big blow for everybody at that moment.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Frank de Boer and Ruben Loftus-Cheek had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Huddersfield. But make sure to come back next week for our post-match review of the game against Liverpool. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.